Hello, everyone. We're about to get started. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for this great event. It really makes me incredibly excited to welcome you, the Architecture League, and all the presenters to Pratt. I feel like it's an overdue kind of partnership relationship, and what an important event to start out with. And I think I'm stepping on some of the things that are going to be said, but I'll say them very quickly. In 2020, the Architectural League of New York put out a call for proposals for the American Roundtable. The question was, how can we see with fresh eyes the condition, the successes, failures, and opportunities of the American landscape? How can we more deeply understand the relationship of individuals and communities to their environments and the constraining and empowering impacts that the built environment has on daily life and the trajectories of lives? It was at that event that in that call, I met Renee then, and I began to hear about Africatown, both the city, the effort, the goals of the community, and the first time that I heard about the competition. I think at the time it was in its nascent stage. And it's so exciting to see it, not only having come to fruition, but the exciting outcomes that we're here to see today. So I'm very excited about this, and for anyone that hasn't seen it, I recommend that you read the Africatown report on the Architectural League's website. The lead editor, Renee Kemp Roden, and Vicky Howell, the associate editor. And I'm excited that you get to see it now. So I'm going to, before I pass it over, I do want to do the land acknowledgement. The Pratt Institute has a living land acknowledgement, and it goes this way. Pratt Institute is situated in Lenape-Hoking, the traditional and unceded homeland of the Lenape, past, present, and future. The Lenape have been living on this land long before the United States was established, and their wisdom is essential to our time. We acknowledge that the genocide, theft of land and resources, forced migration, and systematic cultural oppression of indigenous peoples and nations have a long-lasting impact on the living conditions, mental health, and cultural lineage of indigenous peoples and nations. We acknowledge that the colonizers and their descendants have benefited economically and socially from the oppression of indigenous peoples and nations, and we commit to repairing inequity and rebalancing the power distribution. As learners, as educators, we recognize indigenous peoples and nations' long-time traditions of making, art, and storytelling. We acknowledge the significance of the creativity and how often they are unrecognized as artists, designers, and writers, while their culture is appropriated and taken by other artists, designers, and writers. Only when we are informed of our past can we collectively envision our future. We begin by properly naming the land we reside on and recognizing ourselves as involuntary and voluntary immigrants to this land. We will actively work to challenge the legacy of settler colonialism, undo its extractive and exploitative land practices, and express gratitude to the stewards of the land and water who came before us, and honor the descendants who are here today. For anyone that's interested in the website, the Pratt Institute Living Land Acknowledgement, it also talks about the process with indigenous peoples by which this was created. So back to the event tonight, I want to thank the staff here at the Pratt School of Architecture. Thanks so much to Assistant Dean Alicia Imperiale. I don't see her, but she's probably out there doing, oh, there she is, doing something and making sure that everything's running well, as well as Ramona Allen, Assistant to the Dean, who has left. I also want to thank those who have helped supported this event. This program is supported in part by public funds from New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council and by the New York State Council on the Arts, with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. And thanks so much to all of you, to all of us, the members of the Architectural League of New York, whose ongoing support makes this and all the League's public programs and other initiatives possible. For more information, please visit the League's website, artleague.org. I will also add that I will invite you to November 15th, the second event that we're doing with the League, as well as all our events we're hosting here at Pratt under the theming of cohabitations. Finally, I'm going to turn it over to the League President, Mario Gooden. Mario Gooden is the President of the Board of Directors of the Architectural League of New York. He's also a professor of professional practice, and interim director of the MArch program at Columbia's GSAP. Mario also runs a practice called Mario Gooden Studio, Architecture and Design, a transdisciplinary practice dedicated to design and exploration of architecture and its relationships to culture and knowledge. Thank you so much, and join me in welcoming Mario to the stage.
Thank you, Dean Riano. Although you did steal a little bit of my introduction, so I'll try not to repeat everything that you said. It's really a pleasure for the Architectural League to be here at Pratt tonight for the first of our 2 events with Pratt this season. And I'm really, really excited about this event for the very reasons that Dean Riano said. And so I want to give you perhaps a little bit more of a background regarding Africatown. In 2018, Vicki Howell, President and CEO of MOVE, that means Making Opportunities Viable for Everyone, of the Gulf Coast of southern Alabama, asked Renee Kemp-Rotan to imagine a museum honoring the Africans who had been illegally shipped aboard the slave ship Clotilda and who, after emancipation, came together to build Africatown in Mobile. That would lead to the commission for Kemp-Rotan to weave together Africatown's many community plans into one comprehensive design framework. The central idea was to make sure that the community economically benefits directly from the history, and especially now that the Clotilda slave ship wreckage had been found. The thought was, in particular in light of the at that time, the new lynching museum called the Legacy Museum with the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, not far away, that a similar kind of economic impact could happen related to Africatown's history. But it could also create new businesses, jobs, and tax revenues in the Mobile area. This then led to the birth of the idea for the Africatown International Design Competition that was presented to the Africatown community. Let's see if I can do this. Yes, in the summer of 2019, and was overwhelmingly approved by the community. Subsequently, and this is where the dean stole my thunder, the Africatown community and the editorial team comprised of Renee and Vicki as associate editor, along with contributions, I should add, from Nathaniel Patterson, Deborah Plant, Ramsey Sprague, and Craig Wilkins. Their team was selected by the Architectural League to be one of 10 teams representing small to mid-sized American communities to participate in the American Roundtable Initiative. As the dean mentioned, the American Roundtable offered on-the-ground perspectives on conditions, the successes, failures, and opportunities of the American landscape. And when the Architectural League at first came up with this idea, it was really in the wake of the 2016 national elections, and really thinking about how do we create a condition or a platform that would allow diverse communities to come together to talk about their communities, but to really find out that there is much common ground. And so these commissions, if you will, for digital publications were around the ideas of public space, health, work and economy, infrastructure, and environment. Following that, in the summer of 2019, the Africatown International design competition, as I said, was approved, and then in 2021 it was launched. And it was not, so this is where it changes it slightly. It was not a competition for a single site, but rather it was a competition for an interdisciplinary, multi-site design that breaks what we really think of as a usual architectural competition. Somewhat complex, and you're going to hear about the complexity, but 4 sites with 4 different venues, so 16 design proposals in all, but running from, I would say, urban to rural and back again, comprising what was to be called the Africatown Cultural Mile. And we're going to hear about 3 of these sites tonight. The competition aimed to preserve the heritage of this community by designing this cultural mile to serve as a physical, economic, and cultural network that reshapes the perception of Africatown from that of a singular and discrete place into a geopolitical narrative about social justice, American slavery, the discovery of the Clotilda, celebration of Africatown's founders and Clotilda descendants, preservation and promotion of Africatown for cultural tourism as a destination that would lead to the economic vitality of the Africatown community, the city of Mobile, the state of Alabama, and the region. So tonight we're going to hear from the first place teams for 3 of the sites and to look at their collaborative practice, if you will, working across scales from the urban to individual buildings. In an effort to reflect the many disciplines that are involved in the process of design and building. Rather than focusing on individual practitioners, each of the League's current work series over the last year or so has been exploring what it means to collaborate and practices of collaboration focusing on a single project rather than the notion of a single heroic architect. So tonight, we're going to hear from WXY Architecture and Design, Lawson Associates, Jerome Haferd Studio, and I should note other members of their collaborative included Total Consult and Elizabeth Kennedy, Landscape Architecture, and their team was called Blood Memory, alluding to the 7 fire prophecies in the Anishinaabe Nation. The group developed a shared design vision, vocabulary, and material schemes to support their individual submissions in a collaborative approach befitting the scale and ambition of the competition and the historically layered landscape. Then on Juneteenth of this year, 2023, the jury awarded first place prizes to WXY, Jerome Haferd Studio, and Victor Lawson. So in the spirit of that collaboration, please join me in welcoming the collaborative of Blood Memory, Claire Weiss, Jerome Haferd, and Victor Lawson.
Okay. Here.
There, that's great.
Okay. Right. It's so great to be here to see some familiar faces and to hopefully see the faces of, I know, the folks who are joining us via Zoom. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here and happy to be in person with the 2 of you.
I know, we actually did this collaboration completely by Zoom.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
So like we have to take us back to when did the competition release?
2022.
But what month? It was a number of launches. Yeah. Rumors had it. Each, probably we all heard about it in different places. So,
Yeah.
but it
Yes.
took us, but holiday time was coming up, the term was starting to be over.
Right.
And I had heard about it, and Victor and I collaborate a lot. We collaborate a lot, and
With Jerome.
had this idea that Africatown meant we really needed to talk between America and Africa, which may have been a literal interpretation. And so, Victor, I called you. Then what happened?
So we started getting together. But before you say go forward, Renee had actually approached me in Chicago last year and mentioned that this was something that we had to do. So sort of filed that at the back of my brain. And then when we spoke about it, we realized that our destinies were connected to Africatown one way or the other.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, I think we had all been thinking about this. I had heard about it, been sort of tracking it. I think it definitely tapped various interests in our respective work. The three of us have been in conversation for years around sites kind of like this, but not at this scale. And so by the time the sort of holidays came around, this would have been 2022, like
Yeah.
Claire's saying, I think we each were sort of, and I think the two of you were already talking, and I think we were kind of independently beginning to actually wrap our head around the scale of the ambition of this, but that you and the organizers had put into the kind of the DNA of this competition almost a necessity to sort of be generous and collaborate. And
there
so
were-
we were
yeah.
like, wait, this is huge, and let's start talking about how.
And then there's a fourth and fifth factor. So Farida Abubakare,
Yeah.
who had started the global practice for WXY, had the Canadian Africa connection. And so I started talking to Victor about, well, this is so huge, what kinds of dialogues, like if we're going to look at this competition like a study hall, we're all going to just, like if we approached it like we had a chance to learn something, we watched the movie in a way from each other.
The Descendants.
The
movie
Descendants, the movie The Descendants.
Yeah.
That time period at the beginning of a year and the end of the year to kind of take it differently than how we'd done a competition before. And of course, I'd heard of Theo Lawson.
Yeah.
And so I asked if you would talk to your cousin.
Yeah, we wanted to create a connection to the continent, to Africa. And we talked to people like Wale Soyinka, who's an author, and
Yep.
Theo Lawson has done a lot of work in the cultural space in Nigeria, and is one of the four, leading architects in that sort of genre. And convinced him, actually asked him to join our team. And he agreed.
Yep.
And brought a lot of resources in our conversations.
Right.
So the next thing that we started to do was to figure out how to frame the competition within the four sites and how to essentially think about them in terms of their cultural and spiritual elements that were related to Africatown. So we did a lot of research and looked at the Clotilda and also the entire thing about the Middle Passage and how it affected and it continues to affect development in Mobile, Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sort of microcosm, if you will, of the what were these series of Zoom calls where we just sort of said, and we had some familiarity with one another, let's just talk about what this is bringing up for us. My father is African American. He's from rural Georgia and migrated to Akron, Ohio in the 30s, 40s. So, I kind of was bringing that resonance, whereas, others were talking, we were talking with Theo and Victor about Africa and Farida about what it means to be African Canadian, and also for this to be a kind of cross-cultural conversation. So I literally grabbed a slide from one of those sessions where we were really just taking notes around, okay, could there be certain transcendent themes that we're sharing amongst ourselves in dialogue that then might make their way into our individual submissions to this competition in different ways, and you'll see in a minute that we interpreted this differently, but there then was kind of an accountability structure. I think we were meeting every week and just showing each other what we were coming up with and thinking about. Yeah.
And so it did have to coalesce because I think we wanted to have a structure that wasn't just graphic boards. So Theo really pushed, and you'll see in the next slide, the idea that all these sites were connected. And he did a very, loose sketch of how it was. And then Elizabeth and I, particularly with Site 1, talked about how that same connectivity needed to make a route within each of our sites. So that was a jumping off point, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the discussion between Farida and you and Theo that was instigated a bit by, it was the 8 sites, the 16, there was a lot of numbers in the brief, and I kept thinking the numbers had to mean something, and that if we could make sense of the numbers. So that sort of led to, you saw numerology, it led to a larger discussion about whether in architecture or design, is there some truth or balance, or is there a different system we should be looking at that's different than an American or Westernized or even Cartesian system, and that how do we use things other than how we lay out drawings and stuff. So it was very interesting because we talked about not only the program, but the way architects might work with programs, when in my case, I was unfamiliar, and in Theo and Farida's case, had really literally practiced in Africa.
The other thing too that was quite interesting was how we chose each site and how we gravitated to a particular site. For example, in our case, we wanted to use the water as, there's a song by Fela Ransom Kuti or Fela Anikulapo Kuti that says, water has no enemy, right? And we wanted to use the spirit of the water to connect the continent and Africatown. So we gravitated to the water and that blue way just for that reason.
Right.
So the project was not framed only in Africatown. It had this sort of transcontinental reach to it. Whereas you,
yes, and and Site 2, which I'll talk about more in a minute, though we only have 5 minutes each, is really in a way this transition between land and water, and so really thinking about what does it mean to have a legacy of, let's say, the Black diaspora, often associated with water, but then we're also talking about land and what it means to steward land, and that site just kind of resonated with me. And the venues were very exciting on that site also to look at.
Yeah, well, we'll let Farida explain how we ended up with our site, but in a lot of ways, because Farida was really the organizer of kind of all of, including Theo's site, we kind of waited till the end, and no one had chosen Site 1, which I was thrilled about because it contained the school program. It was the most urban of all of the sites, and therefore I felt like everything needed to we could thread through a lot of the research, and also a lot of the pieces of those programs kind of needed to be in dialogue with one another. So.
Yeah, I thought Fariba's role was invaluable. And she was the glue, right? She kept us together. We came up with design guidelines in terms of what size boards to be, although they'd been, earmarked by the competition, but the background, that all sort of created this sort of consistent, and that was one of the things that Jerome also mentioned. We also looked at materiality
right.
in terms of the architecture. We looked at form
And the rammed earth issue.
and the rammed earth. So all of those things sort of it percolated through
Right.
all of our projects. Although each one had its own identity, there were certain things that were continuous through the project, through the projects.
Yeah, and I think like shifting to that more like how the sausage is made conversation, I think cannot be understated. We have at this point in the discipline and in the profession, there are important critiques to be made of something like a competition and why one would enter it, right? But this was certainly the first competition where I was meeting with essentially competitors, and yet not, because we were going to different sites,
Right.
but really sharing information, truly trying to support one another in a kind of common dialogue, and actually showing each other what we were working on as we sort of were getting towards the finish
I
line.
think
And
it was-
so like, can we imagine a different way to be approaching all sorts of different projects, right?
I mean, I think that was why we wanted, this is an open competition. It had massive amounts of requirements. Why would you do a competition like that? And I think what compelled all of us is, instead of approaching it like competition in that competitive sense, the idea was you don't, you get AI credits to learn, but like when you decide to learn something yourself with other people, it takes on greater meaning. And we were all, I think maybe we were all, even though it was on Zoom, hungry for an experience of sharing, doing something together that was not set up by other circumstances, that wasn't imposed on us, that wasn't, and so somehow it all came together.
There was one other thing too, two other things. I think the whole
What are we
idea of
forgetting,
just
Victor?
having fun.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that was something that we decided that we had to have. Our approach was to make this whole thing a collage. Use fabric to. We wanted to blur the boundaries between architecture and built form, but at the same time, we wanted the sense that the work would empower people when it got built. So there was this sort of economic undertone that hopefully will be applied when it gets built.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's look at the work.
Let's look at the work. I think
We're getting a thumbs up. Is that a good starting point to the next round? Okay. And Farida's going to go first, right? Site 1. Farida just had a baby.
yeah, baby might have
All right.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Hi.
Okay, well, yeah, I want to reiterate that this was an incredible experience, and everything that they said in the preface is true. For knowledge, it took us 35 meetings to get here, so don't feel like the Zoom collaboration was very easy, but I think ultimately, and I hope that I'm not echoing. I do hear my voice in the back, but let me know and I'll try to adjust. But I think ultimately, when we walk you through the process of how we got here, you'll kind of understand why collaboration was such a key portion of this, and so thus a collaborative approach. Okay. So there will be some images that repeat just because, as we reiterate, they set the tone and our kind of understanding of the site. When we first got the competition, this cultural mile was really kind of overwhelming to us. So when understanding that other people, collaborative firms such as Victor Body Lawson and Jerome Haferd were already working through a lot of these sites, it only made sense when we started to really look at the scale, the square footage of the sites, and the different kind of buildings that were expected. I think it was about 16 in total that were throughout. And through that, we kind of worked through how we would divide and conquer, more or less. And through that, also kind of discovering what our real I guess, our passions were and where they laid and how to really contribute to those sites. And so starting really with Site 1, Historica Africatown, this kind of was really the first markings that Claire did of just giving a general sense of taking our WXY urban design approach of where we looked at it in master plan first. Like, how can we really create really clear connotated connections to these 4 different sites that are very far from one another, but really needing that idea of as a pedestrian, as a car, as just kind of coming through this historic Africatown, what does it mean? And how can we go from a welcome center to a training school, to a historic district, to a gateway? And the pink was really the walking route. The blue was kind of that bus route and transit. How does that work? By bike, how does that work? And really also thinking about the water connection as well. How would it transition into Site 2 and 3? And then really kind of give you to that final site of Site 4. And through that, obviously, we did a lot of research. We had a lot at our disposal. Cujo Lewis obviously is at the heart of this historic town, and just really understanding from that time in the 1910s, how has it kind of transitioned to this 21st century space, that through the different, I guess, documentaries we watched, understanding over the past years of how chemical plants and power plants and really just industrial programming has kind of seconded the community and made it quite small, and how can we try to give it life again and make it feel as though it's coming together in its own way and still living its own without having to feel infringed upon by this new zoning or programming that's surrounding it. And then really, as we went through the site, as we said, we chose blood memory because it was really important to understand who was before us, the ancestral knowledge, the passing on of that, and memorializing it in a way that was respectful. I think from watching Descendant and other documentaries, it was clear that there was this desire to really respect kind of the historical aspects, but also to celebrate them and give them space. And so in ways it was really saddening in seeing in the RFP of just seeing vandalized statues and that lack of respect that had been kind of shown, and how could we shift away from this and allow it to be protected and celebrated in a way that not only took into account the history, but also kind of elevated it to a level where people wanted to kind of engage with it, but also kind of give it that space. We started looking at it in different platforms, so 2D and 3D, studying the site, the forms, and Google and throughout AutoCAD, and trying to understand how to commingle the different necessities of the programming and adjacencies in a way that felt like the journey was something that of healing, and that kind of giving that generational knowledge and passing it on to the future of Africatown. So you'll see the transversion of this journey, the bronze heads on the left, kind of stepped away back from the pedestrians so that they allowed that space and security, celebrated with this kind of commemoration of water and earth and plant, and just kind of giving that ideas of always that connection to water, and let it be a positive thing, not a negative connection at this point, and just a moment of healing in this healing garden, in this reflection pond. And then finding ways of celebrating it and telling story, because storytelling is such a huge part of the Africatown experience. This palaver zone was really about creating a moment of where we could film these, we could share them, people could come and listen or just kind of reflect on what they've seen, the graves of these ancestors. Oh, sorry. And then I'll pass off to Claire, but really on the second site, it was again a commemoration in a way that we were meant to really respect the previous school. Claire, if you're there.
Mostly I wanted to talk about the school program. And it was the existing school and the Rosenwald school that was there before it had a lot of meaning to all of us as we looked at the components together, so that the end of this journey and then you turn back is really this school, almost a design school, but a design school for everyone. So Farida, if you just clip through the images, I won't. So it started by sketching different ideas of, that's actually the plan of the Rosenwald School. So we talked about creating almost a courtyard where the park itself could be a theater, it could remain as it was, but then have all of these new layers. So there was like a bit over the top, so we kind of scaled it down in the end. So just looking through the slides, and you can see that sketch about kind of what kind of a space do you make, how do you make thresholds and borders. And we also were intrigued, and this had to do with work Frida had been doing in Ghana on these hospitals, the idea that the earth of Africatown could become the building blocks of Africatown. And so all of these projects explored the idea of the school and the makerspace in the school actually being the production facility. And so you can kind of see this in the rest of the images. I think this might be the last one. Yeah. So these are, in a sense, the other thing was really important was energy generation. So we covered parking lots with solar, and we tried to make a huge amount of shaded spaces, even though we were imagining and spoke to Elizabeth about replacing a huge amount of the trees that have been lost over the years in Africatown. And I think that's it. You can kind of see the idea of it. It actually was a very complex program, and a lot of the idea was to convert what there are streets that have a lot of dead ends now into these sort of multi-purpose streets that were also spaces for eating and having picnics and having school events. And you can see the school, which combined a contemporary architecture with traditional building forms. Great. And we'll just click through the housing. There were so many components. There's also housing infill. But we did imagine, and Frida, maybe you want to finish up and talk about the last couple of slides. We did imagine the sort of scholars on site, that instead of regular tourism, you actually would, both faculty and students, they themselves would live in some of the current houses or be able to rent for them. And they would be working on projects that are there to create new homes. So it wouldn't be about having a dorm building. It would really be about kind of living in community.
Yep, and in this site plan, we started to identify homes that we felt could start to become those areas of dorms, more or less, and kind of these rental homes. I think we were inspired by one of the documentaries that mentioned in Black neighborhoods when celebrities used to come, they would stay at the nicest home, which was likely that of a doctor or lawyer. Historically, so why not continue the historical value of kind of giving space to the community within the community? And then just wrapping up, the gateway was really what tied everything together. See the cemetery at the top there on the east, and then kind of the programming I've shown you, the garden and the healing and the different palabar areas of reflection in the pond. But really just tying back to the other sites, looking back, we're inspired by doors of the door of no return that you've seen in West Africa, slave ports, and how could it frame something positive and looking upon the future. And again, just using materialities that are of the earth and trying to derive forms that are organic and kind of free form, and just that feeling of undulation and clarity, and just that conflict against the urban. It was a nice feeling of just kind of giving these final look aheads of what we could look at of this trauma and all these kind of things that you've happened, and then have something to celebrate and move from. And that's the end.
Okay, live and in person. All right. Can you hear me? Okay, so I'm going to present Site 2. Are there any members of my team here? Do you want to come up and stand with me? Okay. You can if you want. All right. That's Shadeen, right? So I'm going to present Site 2. I'm Jerome Haferd. And, we touched on this, but, when I saw this competition, it resonated with me to work on sites like this one, sites of Black or Indigenous or marginalized significance, and erasure and memory has become the reason that I do this. To contribute this design and be part of this project and to contribute the design to such an effort is already one of the great honors of my career so far. And so it's a real honor to be here and to be here with some of the organizers and people who I admire greatly. I want to also acknowledge my team who helped with this project: Sydney, Soraya, Shadeen, Violet, Tiffany, Gabriel, and Stephanie. I think, again, for me, working on this project as an African American, as the direct descendant of enslaved people in this continent, this is a coming home, if I dare say that, and an attempt to ask, what can design do when confronted with this history? How does that provoke not only a challenge but a new imaginary? And our team was largely Afro-diaspora folks on the team, and I think that that's very significant. And I'm going to just start to read some of the text from the project, which begins with a little bit of a kind of research phase from the summer. So what does it mean to be in the wake? Writer Christina Sharp asks this as she ponders Blackness as existing in the paradoxical wake of loss, of slavery, of ceremony for the dead, and emergence. Through this research, which really began over a year ago, we began to see Site 2 as a transition point from land to water, as an in-between that is neither land nor sea. Our proposal ultimately attempts to embrace and render material this condition of in-between, of double consciousness, that we see again and again in the Black diaspora experience. So these initial ideas developed around how to really conceptualize a new relationship to this transition and encounter between land and water. And so now I'm going to go quickly into the submission itself, which is on the former Josephine Allen Houses site. So Site 2 in the Wake embraces this multi-layered in-between of water and land urbanistically, materially, architecturally. The concept seeks to tap into the woven co-indigeneity of stewardship, both native and African, the doubleness of Kuja Lewis and the descendants, trees of two woods, and the doubling of ground and surface, the literal layers that define a new relationship to earth and water. And again, I'm going to underscore that this idea, which we talked about in the collaborative portion, of really designing a relational concept of how we might relate to things differently, as well as an architectural concept, was really important. So here's an aerial view of our team's proposal, which was really looking at an urban design site plan over top of the now raised Josephine Allen site to interweave this kind of intentional floodplain, which I found so provocative, with the four venues that were put forth for Site 2, which you see here: the Africatown Museum, an adjacent Clotilda boathouse and archive for the display of the replica of the Clotilda slave ship, as well as a design concept for 300 units of this maritime housing that would coexist with an aquatic landscape, and finally a ceremonial gateway of baptism, which creates a public plaza of land and water. And so the urban proposal is centered around the placement of the Africatown Museum and the Clotilda Boathouse into a kind of new civic plaza. Curious to see how the community liked this configuration. We thought it was the best. And wraps those two venues, you can see a model photograph here, in a porous woven facade. This was one of these kind of material strategies we talked about in our collaborative conversations that allows for the public, landscape, and even water to flow in and out of the buildings as seamlessly as possible. We thought about the museum as really a kind of Western idea in a way, that the museum really could be a big house. So you'll see this idea of a kind of house for the community really played out over and over again. The plaza then spills into the gateway of baptism, on the right, which is designed as a circular flooded public chamber that transitions from solid ground to the aquatic landscape. And then here is a perspective view of those two sort of significant buildings in the relationship that they have on the bottom in that elevation section view of how the ground is sort of mutable in this area and sort of begins to descend into a floodplain that the gateway of baptism sort of sits within in this scheme, in this idea. And this is just a slide again that this, in a way, the central architecture material strategy of the site was simple and really kind of centered around these two transcendent ideas of the rammed earth and the coil weave. And so here are some final images of the museum. Again, looking at African domestic buildings, how can it really feel like a kind of house maybe for the community? And then the boathouse in which the replica might become a kind of public archival statement in an era where history is contested and denied. Where the actual archival material might be encased, in this case, in the kind of rammed earth plinth beneath. And then this idea, again, of this maritime housing, which is a kind of, again, microcosm, a smaller version of the same idea of a sort of outer envelope within this rammed earth core inside, and how that can help to mediate this floodplain. And finally, the gateway working with the circle and the crescent as a kind of ancestral shape to gather around and embrace that floodplain in a new relationship to the rising waters. We looked at Afro-Indigenous structures, at the circular dwelling, and then these ideas are part of ongoing research that I've been testing in other projects like this one called Sankofa here in Harlem, where I am based. Thank you very much.
So it takes a village to make a child. And I'd like to introduce Antonia Walker and Manuel Francisco, who worked diligently on this project. And so what you're about to see, although we all came to agreement on how to present this, is really not architecture. I think what we did was look at the boundaries between essence, the spirit, water, and land. And we wanted to blur that background so you would see this sort of hazy possibilities that this could be. So our journey actually begins in the middle passage of the Clotilda's challenging and heartbreaking voyage that occurred after the transatlantic slave trade when it was abolished. Packed with the ship's cramped and deplorable conditions, men, women, and children were forcibly taken from their homes in West Africa, enduring unimaginable hardships. Despite the darkness that surrounded them, they held onto hope, clinging to their cultural traditions and supporting one another. The descendants brought here on the Clotilda created their own community and a new identity, but held on to blood memories of broken, timeless timelines and histories. We wanted to sort of create this thing that was not tangible, but that you could feel the pain. So what we did was represent the water in red. So all of that red is blood, the blood that people shed throughout the centuries as they came back and forth through the slave trade. As you know, the competition is comprised of 4 sites. Our site is the Cultural Mile, which aims to delve deeper into new meanings and opportunities that emerge from living, studying, enjoying, and the respect of life in and around the water. The power of storytelling is revealed first by the local residents, then shared with visitors and beyond to countless generations. In this way, waves of learning, processing, and healing can begin. The mile comprises of Africatown Marina and the Yacht Club, a series of pavilions comprising of the Blue Way tours and a monument known as the Progenitor Gateway, all connected via a boat fleet. So, Antonio.
The Africatown Marina and Yacht Club seeks to reverse the experience of the water's edge as a barrier. Instead, this hub will become a place of connection, immersion, learning, and healing. The built structures are designed to promote active participation in a wide range of water-oriented activities, while the spaces in between allow for moments of reflection and remembrance. The Yacht Club is designed as a symbolic bridge at the mouth of the marina. Here, the museum, club, restaurant, and memorial plaza engages the user while debunking notions about elitist access to water. The Boathouse and Water Filtration Center reflect the tour, teach, and train concepts present in all aspects of the marina. The area will serve as a community launch as well as boat maintenance for the Africatown boat fleet. Workshops ranging from boat building, repair, and conservation will give further research and educational opportunities. In this way, the community can help address the environmental concerns around the industrial pollution of Chickasaw Creek and take pride in environmental stewardship. The Aquatic Center celebrates physical immersion through water sports and recreation. Pools and classrooms will provide swimming lessons, scuba lessons, water safety courses, and public lap swim. Along the water's edge, we have a tree-lined meditation garden and public plaza. These serve both daily use and potential ceremonial uses, allowing for both individual and group reflections. The docks then become a physical manifestation of a threshold to both visitors and locals as they embark into the Africatown Connections Blue Way. The boat fleet will support this local economy through a new water-based transportation route. And this will allow for less dependence on cars by promoting multiple ways to navigate and explore Africatown sites. All the cultural points along the route, local cuisine, and the creek ecology. The fleet will include several boat types, electric and hybrid tour boats and water taxis. Will serve larger groups of 10 to 20 people with transportation, guided tours, and private charters. 1 to 2 person sailboats will allow hands-on knowledge building and recreational experiences. And canoes and kayaks will allow a more intimate experience for tours, class trips, and will allow an up-close connection to certain sensitive areas, such as the Progenitor Gateway and the Clotilda site. Each of the vessels will be designed and incorporate African cloth patterns, so paying homage to African culture. And the Africatown logo will be prominently displayed to help create visual cohesion. Finally, the operation of the fleet will provide a host of training and job opportunities in all aspects of tours, boat crews and maintenance, marketing and scheduling, and all of this will support and enhance the experiences along the Blue Ways tour.
Dotted along the banks of the Chickasaw Creek, Mobile River, and 3 Mile Creek is an interpretive trail consisting of 15 pavilions, which can be visited radially from the marina or from one trail end to another between other sites. Each pavilion, created with materials such as blackstone, rammed earth, and glass, embodies an aspect of history and mythology while being wayfinders to let visitors know their location and what other points of interest there are to see around them. Each pavilion is also an opportunity for artists of the area to show their work along the walls of the site as a form of African expression. Some of these pavilions we'll show are known as Ile Ifa, a pavilion marking the beginning of a journey, the Underground Railroad, a pavilion allowing visitors to enter an underwater viewing platform beneath Chickasaw Creek, Ogun, god of war and iron, a rocky pavilion allowing visitors up to an observation deck over Chickasaw Creek, Eagle columns, 110 blackstone columns representing each original Clotilda survivor emerging from an embedded platform in a hyper-style hall formation, and Olodumare, a truncated and engraved obelisk in the style of kintsugi, or the art of repairing broken things, in a stepped plaza adjacent to the Chickasaw Creek, symbolizing a fractured community who has come together with age and divine guidance. Lying distinct from these pavilions, is a gateway to what was before. Known as the Progenitor Gateway, this curved landscape and no-wake zone lies directly across from the Africatown Marina and Yacht Club, allowing for direct access via kayak or small water vessel. The progenitor takes the form of an abebe, or a hand fan, surrounded by 16 trees and a raised berm of earth representing a large snake. At its center stands a large tree of life, similar to freedom trees such as the unfortunately recently fallen silk cotton tree of Freetown, blossoming over the imprint of the Clotilda ship. The shape and radial design of the progenitor means to invoke the culture of Africatown's ancestors, allowing visitors to reflect and rediscover the drowned past, nearly forgotten had it not been for the descendants who had kept the story alive.
Thank you. With these moving pieces, we're beginning an investigation into the past, which we hope leads into further development of design and community building opportunities that the Chickasaw Creek can provide for the residents of Africatown and beyond. We're glad to be able to lay a foundation in the history of Africatown, to create a bridge between the past, the present, and the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire, Jerome, and Victor. And in the spirit of collaboration, because there are multiple scales of collaboration, not only in terms of design, but also in terms of the organization of the competition, in terms of the competition jury. We've invited Vicki Howell, who is the president and CEO of MOVE, of Mobile, to give a response. And then we're also going to hear from 3 of the competition jurors, Anderson Flynn, then Darren Patterson, and then Major Joe Womack. So I think first up is going to be Vicki. Vicki, are you there?
First of all, I want to thank God because the idea for this kind of fell into my head on February 2nd, 2018. I want to thank the ancestors who obviously are guiding this process. For you guys to pick up on so much of the nuances in such a profound way, I know it has to be a spiritual leadership of our ancestors. And then thirdly, I want to thank Renee Kemp-Rotan, because we would not be here without her and her vision for how to take an idea that was swirling around in my head and say, how do I say, and the first person I called, I said, you know what, Renee Kemp-Rotan can make some sense out of this. And for her to bring all of these ideas together from various sources that we brought to the table, from the Africatown Neighborhood Plan, from the Blue Wave Plan, from the the Urban Studios plan for Africatown USA State Park. And then have discussions with so many people over so many years. You know, we started in 2018 when the ship was initially found, but I knew something could be built out of this. So, and I also want to thank our board members who took this crazy woman's idea and said, you know what, Vicki, we're gonna be here with you and we're gonna go forward on this. So there's so many people to thank, and of course the gentleman who are on this phone call, at this meeting. There's so many things and so many people have been involved in this. And so from the very beginning, this has been a collaborative process. From the very beginning, it's included a lot of ideas and concepts. From the beginning, it's always a continuation of what came before us. Because we know that these ideas didn't just pop into my head or Renee's head. These have been ideas that have been floating around for a very long time. But one thing I do know is there's a scripture in the Bible that says, without a vision, the people perish. And so it's easy to talk about what you want to do, but it's nothing like seeing it in 3D, or at least in this level, 2D that can be made into 3D. But the opportunity for me and for MOVE and for what we were trying to do, which initially started with the museum, but kind of expanded to include all these other areas because of Renee's brilliance in terms of being able to make all these things look and feel seamless. And the idea said, Vicki, what you need to do to bring us together is a competition. I said, what? And what does that mean? And so, and during the research, I think one of the first places that she showed me was this place in London. They were creating a museum there. And in the process, I learned something about something called the London Colorful Mile. And I said, Renee, why don't we just take the same concept and turn it into maybe the Africatown Colorful Mile so we can give it a name. And by pulling all these different projects together, we can create a seamless whole of something that can be bigger than the sum of their individual parts. And the fact that you guys all came together to collaborate, like we collaborated together, Renee and I, and then with the board members, the MOVE board members, and with people in the community, like the idea for the Clotilda boathouse came from one of the board members' sister, who said, we were talking about how the young man drowned because he didn't know how to swim and he couldn't save his brother. Even though he saved his brother, he couldn't save himself. And so I know, why don't we do a yacht club? And why don't we do a Clotilda boathouse? And so the collaboration of all this is just very powerful. And then I myself went to Benin to speak with the people that the mayor of Pritchard was talking to, and called the Benin House Project. And so Victor really picked up on the notion of the connection by water. We're connected to connecting all these areas and the continent of Africa, and not Africa, but also the diaspora. Those people who've been sent to all the other places, like you said, from West Africa over to the countries that you saw on the map. I mean, in a brilliant display of understanding of what this is really all about. So we have an opportunity, for me, was not just to share our history, but if there's any money that's going to be made from this, it needed to have a way to pull the resources into the community itself to its own story. Because we have so many stories that need to be told, and books aplenty like this one have been written about Africatown, but those things are not really ours. They don't really belong to us. So the ideas that came to us, the ideas that were floating around, the ideas that were divinely appointed and downloaded have been represented so well through these designs. And the fact that you guys came together to collaborate lets me know, and lets us all know, that the spirit of collaboration is what's going to keep us all together when we come to this. I raised up this book by Ben Raines because when he found the ship, I'm included on page 219 here in our work with the competition. And basically he's talking about John Smith and the idea he had for Sub-Saharan Africa and Caribbean Trade Center. The idea for, the Africatown Welcome Center that Joe Womack, at that time, he and his group put together the plan that went into a proposal to the state of Alabama for the BP oil money. All the different plans that were floating out here. And then also the Legacy Museum. And I knew from work that I had done when I was a reporter in Birmingham and working with Renee on the Birmingham Civil Rights Heritage Trail, that there's something in our story that is valuable. And when with value comes money. And with that money comes the opportunity to keep that in-house. So the idea was that looking at the Legacy Museum, we started this before the Legacy Museum kind of came out, the one in Montgomery. But in the movie Descendant, and Joe was mentioning the economic impact that facility was having on the city of Montgomery. And he said $1 billion, and I said billion, that's with a B. And I believe Africatown has the potential to do even better than that. And by collectively channeling this money through these places that have been thought about and created, or potentially created, at least the idea of them have been created, the potential for us turning that money and circulating the opportunities that it will create into the community can be transformational. That was always our intent, to make this a transformational meeting. And not only that, the idea too was to make it big. A big vision requires big money and big opportunities. So from this book, Ben's book, I want to read this thing. Basically, Vicky's team or Move launched a national design competition inviting urban planners and architects to reimagine Africatown, filling its vacant lots with new homes and replacing the decaying and abandoned housing projects with a cultural center on a grand scale. Darren Patterson credits Vicky with thinking big and sticking to her guns when people in the community scoffed at what she imagined. He said the old guard, himself included, was thinking at first about what they could scrape together and not what the history deserved. Our history, especially as a race of people, well, not a race, but a group of people who are descended from people who had been enslaved, is a very powerful one, and that's a global one. Africatown deserves more to be just seen as a place to come and visit and have nice little outings, but to be an economic powerhouse, a cultural powerhouse, and a commercial powerhouse. Our hope is that we can take up live in the spirit of John Smith, of Henry C. Williams, of Anderson Flynn, of Joe Womack, and Darren Patterson, all those people who have gone and those who are still with us, because we have an opportunity to do something I don't think has ever been done before. And our jury chair, Jack Travis, mentioned that this competition organized by 2 Black women probably constitutes one of the biggest, largest, blackest competitions that has ever been organized in the history of the world. I said, well, maybe with the building of the pyramids, perhaps. But the idea that we can take these concepts and do something with them, and it's done primarily by African-American people and people of African descent, Africans, and people who are committed to the cause of righteousness and justice and environmental justice and all kinds of justices, that we have an opportunity to put our hands on this and have it be Afrocentric. It's probably one of the most powerful things that has ever been put out here. And I want to thank Jack, I want to thank Mario, and all the designers who put their hands to helping us think this through. One of the jurors, he said when we had our meeting via Zoom as well, and he said, Vicky, if we could just take a screenshot of all the people who are on this shot, and mostly all Black people, talking about a Black culture or a Black future in a Black space. And our hope is that by pulling these ideas together, we can take it and we can do some implementation of some sort. It's going to take unity, because nothing like this can happen with a few people. It's got to take everybody in this competition, everyone in the community who sees these designs, and now because we can see what the future can be, we can probably work on something that can lead to something that's real. So the opportunity that you guys have provided for us, that you caught the vision, that you understand the vision and can put it into and can articulate it so well, it's just very heartwarming to me. And I really have to give praise to God, because at the end of the day, this is his project as far as I'm concerned, as far as Move is concerned, and that you all get to be part of this amazing, powerful, transformative project, and that you put such thought and effort into it in response to our thought and our effort. It's just really heartwarming. It's very powerful. I'm very moved by it, and I hope you guys are too. And we're going to follow up with this. It's not just a talk fest. Renee and I did apply for a grant through the NEA design grant, with the hope we'll know something next month, with the hope that we'll be able to convene a national meeting of you guys here in Mobile. And it will be called Reviving Underserved Communities by Design, because everything that we're doing is by design. In my mind, if things have happened to the Black community by design to thwart our progress, then by design, things can be done to improve our evolution, if you will. I don't know if you guys can feel it, but there's something new and something exciting in the atmosphere. I'm glad that I was able to catch a little bit of it. I'm glad that Renee is able to give us a vision of how it could look. I'm glad that now we have a new team of people who are now part of this movement, because this is a movement. And I'm happy to be a part of this in any way that we can help facilitate moving this forward. We're all ears. Thank you for, again, to our board members. Oh, and I wanted to one more thing. Thank you to the sponsors. I want to read this out. Our prize money and operational funding came primarily from Better Place Foundation and Friends out of Birmingham. Thank you very much. Seed funding from the American Institute of Architects and NOMA, the National Organization of Minority Architects. We love you. We couldn't have gotten started without you guys. Other support came from Visit Mobile, the Mike and Patsy Dow Charitable Fund, 400 Years of African American History Commission, and our support from our elected official, Mayor Gardner of the city of Pritchard, and our friends in Benin, who we've made visits there, and we will be going back soon. I just want to say that thank you to the people who are on this panel for your support, because if it weren't for Joe and Anderson, we wouldn't have the community meeting with the community say yes. And again, all thanks to Renee and the beautiful work that she's done on behalf of this community. I love you, Renee. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you guys.
Thank you so much, Vicky. And now we're going to hear from Anderson Flynn for some brief remarks.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm not going to be as lengthy as Renee as Vicky is. I just want to say thank you to all of you. I think it's vitally important that, and I've said this quite often to Joe. Joe and I go back to the 4th grade when we first came together, and we've been together many, many years. And we've always recognized that in order for Alabama to make any serious changes, it required people from the outside to come in to make those changes. Mobile in particular has lost some of the greatest minds and skilled people in the world. And one of my goals has always been to give back. There's a gentleman that unfortunately many of you have never probably even heard of, that was with John Smith and before John Smith, and his name was William Bill Clark. Bill Clark was my mentor, and from the 9th grade until now, he's always been a part of my life. He died in 2015. And one of the things that carried me through everything that I do is that Bill always talked about real trusting friends and family. And he always said that real trusting friends and family never harm one another. And so having met some of you by Zoom, having spent a great deal of time, especially with Renee, you know, there's a spiritual piece that really resonates with me in terms of friends and family. As you went through some of the designs that have been chosen in illustrations, I'm also the president of the Mobile County Training School Alumni Association. And in a couple of weeks, we're actually having an activity that will involve the Rosenwald National Campaign Group. They will be in Mobile. As you know, Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington, and especially Booker T. Washington, played a significant role in Africatown in many ways, including the school and other ways. And so what you're doing now is a continuation of that legacy. It's a legacy where the best and the brightest are giving back to those who need it the most. And so I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. And I hope that you will be a part of our friends and family raising and healing process as you have been, that you will continue to be a part of that. And as we move forward, change will occur and will happen because we're living a part of a legacy that cannot be stopped by all the things that we see out here. And that was something that Bill Clark always told me. And there was another guy that I want to quote that also was a part of my life. And that was a guy named Curtis Harden. Curtis is the only coach that's still living in Mobile of all of our coaches. And he told me something when I was in the 10th grade. He said, Anderson Flynn, you have two choices in life. You can have a pity party or you can beat them with success. And the thing that I saw this evening, and I saw you guys do over the years, and I saw from Booker T. Washington and reading his work and Julius Rosenwald, we're going to beat them with success because great people do not have pity parties. I just want to thank all of you for all that you're doing and continue to do it. And God bless you from now and forever. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anderson. To all of you, my name is Darren Patterson, and I've got to tell you that I really didn't understand architecture until Jack Travis brought it all together. The work that he's done, as soon as I saw the work he's done on the Brooklyn Hospital, I knew then what it was about. It just came on like a light. I've been knowing Renee for about 4 or 5 years now, but it just didn't come together for me until I saw Jack explain things. Yes, I knew about the Parthenon. Yes, I knew about the Roman Colosseum. But until I understood that architecture is the way to continue life long after a lot of people before it are gone, it didn't come clear. I'm just a sports writer. I just tell stories about games. I'm just a technical writer. I deal with facts and information. But when I saw the design for Happy Hill, Josephine Allen, and I was one of the jurors on there, I was terribly excited. These last 4 years with Africatown and the people that we've met here have been just awesome because there's been so many people that have came into our lives. I'm tripping over archaeologists every day. I'm tripping over people every day who are marveling at something that people like me and Anderson Flynn lived. The one thing about it, I was not told about the people who were the descendants of Clotilda. I knew the grandchildren and the children of those people. I was raised by those people. I smelled their food. I ate their food. I knew them. I talked to them. And when I saw the design, for Josephine Allen, it's about honoring them, the 110 people in that cargo hold of that ship, my ancestors. I know now that this is the way to do it, through architecture that speaks volumes about who those people were. I understand it more than I ever have. I thank you. I thank Jack Travis. I thank Renee Kemp for getting me to understand the importance of what architecture means. And now I see the picture. Dr. Joseph Brown, he is a Jesuit priest from Southern Illinois University. He told me about 3 years ago during the festival, Spirit of Our Ancestors Festival, which we have here every February. He told me that the spirit of the ancestors live in you. They live in you, descendants. All of a sudden, it became clear why I do some things I do, why I act the way I act, why I treat people the way I treat people, how people react to me, because the spirit of the ancestors live in me. The Josephine Allen site is a linchpin, can be a linchpin for everything we want Africatown to be. We have so many ideas, so many ideas. A lot of them were already transmitted to you in the design of what the architects saw it being. It's just amazing how everything came together through architecture. And now I understand. Brian Stevenson raised his own money. It's not about money. This is about the spirit of the ancestors. Brian Stevenson in Montgomery raised his own money because the city of Montgomery did not see his vision. So he said, okay, I'll deal with this. Raised his own money in upwards of $20 million to build the Equal Justice Initiative and to build the Lynching Memorial, the National Memorial for Justice and Peace. I talked to the people, the Mass Design Group, who built the National Memorial for Justice and Peace, and they told me, we understand there. Come back when you have $20 million. I told them I'll be back, and I will be back. because honoring those ancestors, there is no amount of money that can be purposely spent that can honor their heritage, what they did. Coming here in a ship for 2 months in a cargo hold, butt naked, sleeping where they crap, eating where they crap, chained together, women being abused by the crew, only allowed on deck for 1 day a week so their muscles wouldn't atrophy, because as cargo, they would have been no good to their future masters. The only way to correctly honor those people, my ancestors, is to make sure their memory lives forever. On the Clotilda Descendants website and in the Heritage House Museum, there's a quote. It says, "Never let the world forget. Never let the world forget the plight of the 110. Through architecture, I now see the world will forever remember." I can't thank you enough for what you've done. I can't thank you enough for what you have ticked in my head. I can't thank you enough for where we're going from here, because we are going there. And we're going to do it through perseverance. We're going to do it through the spirit of the ancestors. And Lord knows, we're about to do it through architecture. I thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again.
Thank you, Darren. My name is, I'm retired Marine Major Dr. Joe Womack, Africatown born and bred, and damn proud of it. I first said that back in about 2010 to the Mobile City Council, and I've been saying it ever since. And ever since, I've been more and more proud of Africatown, the community in which I was born and raised. It's a very special place for us and for the world, really. Some years ago, I looked up and I saw that my college, St. Paul College in Virginia, was gone, closed down. I looked around and I saw that my high school had been demoted to a middle school, and my elementary school was gone, and I saw plans that was going to wipe out our Africatown. And I said, God damn it, you ain't gonna take everything. And I knew at that time that we had to take a stand. Not just me, but we all had to just take a stand, because we had been passed the baton that we really wasn't passing it on. We wasn't moving with it. And the baton came from that last shipment of slaves that landed here in Mobile. They got here in 1860 and 1865. After Civil War, they were set free. And they wanted to go back home, but they couldn't go back home. They didn't have the money of anything else. So the chosen leader at that time, Cudjoe Lewis, said, well, during it, I'll make my Africatown right here. And that's what they did. And that's what we have to do. We have to continue to make Africatown in Alabama, Mobile, right here. We have to take their vision and roll it forward and make their vision be our vision and make it what we think that they would like for it to be in 2023, in 2030, in 2050, in 2060, 200 years after they was forced in this country and enslaved. What do you think they would have wanted back? What do you think they would have done if they were still here, if they were still growing, if they were still learning, if they were still moving like they were back then? What do you think they would have known for? What would have made Africatown look like? That's what we have to ask. And this competition did a doggone good job of doing that, especially the portion that I was a part of, which was the Africatown Connections Blue Way. Blue Way. That's water. That's how they got here. The community of Africatown is surrounded on 3 sides by water. And that's how we grew up. That's how they managed. And they were on the water. And our goal, like Anderson and I always said, is to move it back toward the water for our kids and relatives to enjoy years from now like we did. You know, Africatown is right on the Tennessee River Delta, which is the second largest river delta in this country. But you wouldn't know it. But it's part of the Tennessee River Delta. People locally don't talk about that. And by and large, Tennessee River Delta is protected by the National Wildlife Associates, except for that little piece right there that's owned by the black folks. It wasn't protected. And because it wasn't protected, industry was allowed to move in. And it has really affected the individuals there. But they didn't move, they didn't leave. They bought property, they settled down, and they made a way. And so that property is still here, the 5 square miles or so that they bought and purchased legally. The paperwork, they bought that property legally. You know, and sometimes I feel like the guys on the hit series have been around for a while, people now discovering, called Yellowstone. And I've been handed the ranch, but the ranch is in disrepair. They lost some money. The houses need repair. The roof, the ceiling, the floor, the barn, the fences. But every day, some bad guys show up at the fence waiting for me to turn them back so they can throw the models on a cocktail and burn the place down. So what's your priority? Number one priority is to protect that place, and that's what I do. Me and my buddies, we protect Africatown. We keep it safe so that repair people can come in and fix it up. Because if you allow the Africatown to be pushed aside and bulldozed over, you have to worry about fixing the house, in the roof, in the chimney, in the barn. It'll be gone. We have to keep it here for prosperity's sake, for all America, for all the world to see. Because it's a national, our goal is to renovate and renew Africatown and make it a national monument, a living monument for that last shipment of slaves, a living monument to the last shipment of slaves. And when we do it the way that we want it done, it thus will become a cultural heritage tourist destination for the entire world to come and see, because it deserves that recognition. It deserves whatever we can put into it. And we estimate that by 2060, it will be 200 years after they got here, and after $1 billion, we'll have that done. And that's what we're working toward. We know it's not a short-term goal. We didn't expect for it to be, but we're working on this long-term goal to make Africatown what it should be, what it should have been a long time ago. But we're heading in the right direction now. We got people on board who are serious about what we're doing, and we're going to do things the way that others have done to try to turn it around and make it not be what it should be. And we're going to do things intentionally. It's going to be our intention to keep those sites that are there for others to come and see. You know, we can't worry about what happened before we got here, but we're here now. We got the world with us, and we're going to carry on the torch and make the Africatown that living monument to that last shipment of slaves. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Anderson Flynn and Darren Patterson and Joe Womack. We've all heard her name so many times this evening so far, so I want to call Renee Kemp-Rotan up for a few remarks in response.
Well, my goodness. I'm Renee Kemp-Rotan, first Black woman to graduate from Syracuse University in architecture in 1975. And then I went to Columbia University, graduated with a Master of Science in Urban and Regional Planning, spent 2 years at the Architectural Association in London, studying under Archigram, and also under my proverbial mentor of all time, the great Paul Oliver, member of the Royal Society of Cultural Geographers. So I come to this project with a lot of emotion, a hell of a lot of training. It became a calling, all because a friend of mine invited me for over 5 years to come to see Africatown. I'm from DC originally. My first move down south was to serve as a principal master planner for the '96 Olympics in Atlanta. Stayed in Atlanta for 10 years, and then got an offer to come to Birmingham, an offer I could not refuse. Lots of things happened in Birmingham that were good for the people that dealt with urban design, but I got the call to come to Africatown. I had been in Birmingham for 15 years and had never heard of the place. Couldn't believe it. Went over to Africatown one day by invitation of Vicki Howell, and my first visit was to the historic cemetery. I could not believe that there were tombstones there from 1868 that had the names of Africans in the African language next to their plantation names. First time I had ever seen a cemetery where the African names were on the tombstones. Captured my heart. I was hooked. So Vicki says, well, come over here and why don't you do something? And I'm like, well, what the hell can I do? I've just discovered the place, but there are projects all over the place. We need someone to coordinate. So originally I thought, well, why don't we do a design competition for an imaginary Africatown museum? Took that to the community, and they said, a museum? We need more than that down here. And I said, well, what else do you need? They literally named 16 things. So rather than get into a tussle of one selection over another, like a complete idiot, I said, we're going to do a competition for all of the things that you say that you want. And took it on. Now, one of the things that gives me great pleasure as the professional competition advisor for this unbelievable and most ambitious quest was that I really am a disciple of design. I do believe that design is one of the most transformative disciplines that humankind has ever invented. One can be intentional, one must study human behavior and history. It literally covers all of the sciences. So I spent an inordinate amount of time doing a whole bunch of research on Africatown, the international slave trade, what happened with the bet, the building of the schooners, the building of the slave ships. And then I began to talk to the actual descendants of that experience who are still living in Africatown. The story is 1860, 110 were brought over, incarcerated on plantations for 5 years. Then comes Emancipation Proclamation, where the slaves are freed. Then the story gets a little hazy for me because I'm trying to figure out how is it possible that enslaved Africans after 5 years can have the wherewithal to buy land and build anything? Who would not be totally gutted and devastated by that experience? And the more research that I did, it became even more profound as to how these Africans built their own town. First of all, there was the 13th Amendment that freed the slaves, and it was the 14th Amendment that basically gave permission for the emancipated slaves to basically buy land. That did not apply to the Clotilda Africans because the 14th Amendment to buy land and to vote only applied to the African Americans who had been born in this country. So that meant that the Africans on the Clotilda had to first become naturalized citizens before they could gain the privilege to actually buy the land. Can you imagine learning the legal system in a culture that you do not understand and having the wherewithal to follow the rule, to become naturalized, to buy the land? And after buying the land, had become organized enough to build on the land. I mean, incredible stuff, incredible stuff. So the more I learned about the history, we had 1 million civic engagement events. And I must say that the building of the architectural program was based on real live needs of the community. The program for Site 1, Historic Africatown, the Site of Blood Memory, required that a memorial garden be built. Real live stuff. Cemetery was there since 1868. Then we talked to Joe Womack. Much blighted community. We knew that we needed to have a competition around 30 infill housing units. And then we had the Mobile County Training School that started as a Rosenwald school by Booker T. Washington. And Lord knows that school presently uses the only Rosenwald site that is still in use. The population of children making has diminished in Africatown. So we know that in 5 years, the school will be closed. There'll probably be no more children. So the competition insisted that the Mobile County Training School be turned into a boarding school, a public boarding school, where scholars from Africa, artists from Africa, basically have faculty and residents so that children all over the state of Alabama could come there as a magnet, based on real life stuff. Site 2, the abandoned public housing site, 40 acres. The mayor of Mobile had just wiped out more than 300 units of housing there. And then when we went to talk to the mayor about support for the competition, he says, you cannot possibly build anything on that public housing site. It's in a flood zone. So guess what we did? We said, great, we'll flood the flood zone on purpose, and that's where we'll put a replica of the Clotilda boathouse. That's how that program got invented. So this has really been a political movement, to be quite frank with you, of which I'm extremely proud. The Blue Ways site. That site is all water-edged facilities. Because of a little brown boy drowning 6 or 7 years ago, we decided to put a swim club there to teach little black kids how to swim. We found out that more than 70% of black kids don't know how to swim nationally. So that became a part of the programming. And then we had talks with the Black Scuba Divers Association, who promised us that if we could teach children to swim, they would in fact make sure that those children became certified scuba divers so they could go underwater and actually see the sunken Clotilda that brought their ancestors over. That program is now working at the Mobile County Training School, put together by Anderson Flynn and the Black Scuba Divers Association. So that was a real live project. The notion that the descendants of Africatown know more about the waterways than anybody else living also became very important to us. And that's why, for Site 3, we insisted that the designers design a fleet of boats that could be commandeered by the descendant community so they could generate revenue by taking tourists on eco tours along that waterway. The fourth site, 160 acres of land that was ceded over to the city of Pritchard. We decided to put all of our big ticket items there. An African spa hotel, an African Performing Arts Center, an African Convention Center, and then a gateway of return to Africa. So all of these facilities for the community were very much needed. And our joy is that we got responses worldwide. The website got 20,000 hits. We had 118 teams globally to register for the competition. At the end of the day, 23 teams submitted. We received 169 boards of ideas and 150 pages of design essays that had to be read to understand exactly what the global design community respected of the questions that we were asking. And then I called Jack Travis. Can you just hold up your hand? I called Jack Travis, who many of you know, and begged him to please become the global jury chair for this adventure. And then we organized a jury of 16 people, never been done before. Half of those people were archaeologists, historians, and architects, and the other half were community activists, descendants, and public officials. So the first time in this community's history, we joined experts with the boots on the ground, and together they made decisions about who would win first, second, third, fourth place in each of the categories. It warms my heart to have actually met some of the participants who won big prize money. We raised $100,000 for cash prizes. First place winners got $10,000. Second place winners got $8,000. Third place winners got $5,000. Fourth place winners got $2,000. And there was one honorable mention. Got no money, but got mentioned honorably. So, the responses that you guys have shared with us are mind-blowing for me. Because it's one thing to write a 40-page program for 4 sites. I literally wrote 160 pages of information that dealt with the history, the needs of the people, the matrix of square footages and what was expected. And it was not happenstance that I required that each of the contestants had to design 4 buildings. Not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 buildings. Because even though I am trained as an architect, my practice is that of an urban designer. We're interested in ensembles of buildings that deal with place knowing, place making. We wanted you to make a place of these questions. And so today, I'm bowled over. Question now, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with all this material? Well, it's a design idea competition. And we knew that going in because we understand the politics of planning. The community does not own any of this material, any of the land, but all of the 16 sites are publicly owned. So at the end of the day, we're going to put all of the competition submissions into a catalog that we give to the community so that the community can begin to fight the battle of what they would like to see on each of the sites. The second thing that we're working on, and then I'll wrap up, we realize that the community itself is very interested in how you get from ideation to implementation. So we've invented a new game called Spade. 52 tools of the trade that stack the deck in the community's favor, showing the community the other 51 ways that they can make their dreams literally come true. This is the instruction book for how to get it done, and you all have given us your heart, your minds, and your souls, and we shall move forward with it. Thank you so much.
Is the Spade book available yet?
You can look at it in this room. I have one prototype copy. It's not been mass produced just yet because we're test driving all of the philosophy and procedures here. If you want to see it, ask the question.
Is there another question? For the design team or for anyone? Well, if not, I really want to thank Claire and Jerome and Victor and your teams and everyone, our respondents, the jurors. This really was a collaborative effort, what seemed to be a kind of Herculean effort. I want to thank Jack Travis, who shepherded, I think you called him the commando? Yes. Yes, who shepherded the jury. And thank you all for coming tonight and for supporting Africatown. Thank you very much.